At my son's wedding, my ex-husband's new wife wore a white dress and called me the help. I let it slide until she got to the mic for her speech. That's when I pulled out the envelope. What was inside silenced the room. I was already furious before the ceremony even started. There's crossing a line, and then there's dragging it, stomping on it, and setting it on fire. That's what my ex-husband's new wife did the second she showed up to my son's wedding in a white dress that honestly looked like a knockoff bridal gown. Satin, beading, even a small train. People turned when she walked in. One of the waiters looked confused and asked if she was part of the wedding party. She just laughed and said, "Oh no, I'm family. That's just the help over there." She tilted her head toward me when she said it. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stood there letting her think she won that round. She always thinks she's clever. Years ago, when my husband left me for her, she strutted into our lives like she was some kind of upgrade. I stayed silent then too. Let them have their little fantasy. But deep down, I knew people like her always unravel eventually. You just have to give them rope. I hadn't planned on making any kind of statement at the wedding. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wore a navy blue dress, simple and elegant. Nothing flashy. I kept to myself, chatted with relatives, focused on my son and his fiancée. I wasn't going to let her pull me into her circus. But when she started parading around like she was the bride's mother, waving to people, snapping selfies with centerpieces, and cornering guests to tell them stories about her role in raising our son, I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Rage. She crossed the line again when she insisted on being in every photo. The photographer was clearly confused. At one point, she inserted herself between me and my son in a group shot. Didn't even look at me. Just took her spot, smiling like she belonged there. My son gave me a look. He knew, but I just shook my head. Let it go. I had something planned. Something small, but loud. Tucked inside my purse was an envelope. Cream-colored, unmarked, sealed. Not a word written on it. But what was inside was going to stop every smug little smirk she gave me for the rest of the night. She didn't know it yet, but I was about to give my son and his new wife a gift, something to help them start fresh. A gesture that would come from me and me alone. Something generous, meaningful, and impossible to ignore, and it would be handed over at exactly the right time. Then came the speeches. The maid of honor spoke first. It was sweet, emotional, a little funny. Then the best man, same thing. Then somehow she ended up with the microphone. She wasn't listed. No one introduced her. She just stepped up, smiling like it was expected. My ex-husband didn't stop her. He just stood off to the side like he always did, watching, passive, useless. She launched into a speech that sounded rehearsed. Something about how it takes a village and how she'd always known this boy was destined for something great. She told a story about helping him prep for college interviews, which never happened. She said he used to come to her for advice. He never did. Then she added a line I'll never forget. I feel like I've watched him grow into the man he is today, and I couldn't be more proud of the role I played in shaping him. It was subtle, but people shifted in their seats. Even her tone had changed. She was trying to replace me without ever saying my name. When she finished, she beamed like she just delivered a presidential speech. A few people clapped, unsure if they were supposed to. She walked back to her table like she just won something. That's when I stood up. I didn't make a scene. I walked to the newlyweds, hugged them both, said how proud I was, and handed the envelope to my new daughter-in-law. She smiled, a little surprised, then opened it without thinking. She froze. Inside was a certified check for $30,000. No speech, no big announcement, just a quiet gesture. But the moment she pulled it out, the reaction around the table said everything. My son blinked, then stood and hugged me again, tighter this time. All eyes turned toward our corner of the room. Whispers started. Phones came out. People began asking questions. And across the venue, my ex-husband's wife sat down slowly, still in her wedding white gown, watching it all unfold with a look that said she finally understood. She had no idea who she was messing with. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls. 6 from an unknown number, 3 from my ex, 5 from a number I recognized but had never saved, hers. She'd started texting too. Long ones, paragraphs, the kind of messages people write when they're trying to sound casual but are barely holding it together. Hey, just wanted to say what a beautiful gesture last night. Very unexpected. Can I ask, where did you get that kind of money? Seriously, though, we should catch up sometime. I feel like we haven't ever really had a chance to talk woman to woman. No punctuation in the second part. She was spiraling. I didn't respond. I went about my morning like I always do. Coffee, emails, and some work I had to finish before noon. I wasn't going to entertain whatever performance she was setting up. The wedding was over. I'd done what I came to do. By noon, my phone was buzzing again. This time it was my ex. He left a voicemail, which he almost never does. In it, he said he was concerned and wanted to clear the air. He added that his wife had been a little shaken up and just wanted to understand what was really going on. Understand what? That I had a career? That I'd spent the last 10 years building something in silence while they were too busy showing off their vacations and leased cars on Facebook? I never told anyone in the family what I did for a living after the divorce, partly because they never asked, and partly because I liked it that way. The only person who really knew was my son. And even he didn't know the full scope. They thought I was just fine, stable, maybe quiet, the woman who got cheated on and faded into the background. And then I handed over $30,000 at a wedding, and suddenly I wasn't so invisible anymore. Around 2 p.m., I got another message from her. I don't mean to pry, but if there's anything you can do to help us out with some of our debt, that would be amazing. Things have been really tight lately, and I just think it would mean a lot if we could move forward as one big blended family. I know you want what's best for your son's name, and that means helping us, too. That word made me laugh. She wanted to use my son's happiness as leverage, and she wasn't even subtle about it. I didn't respond. I just read the message once, took a screenshot, and archived it. That night, my son and his wife called. Just them. No background noise, no interruptions. He thanked me again. She was still overwhelmed. They decided to use the money for a down payment on a condo. And the way they talked about it, it was like I'd handed them a future. That's what I wanted. Not to outshine anyone, not to prove anything, just to give my son a better start than I ever had. And yet, even then, she was still trying to make it about her. Because right after I hung up, I got one more message. You know, it's a little suspicious. That kind of money doesn't come out of nowhere. Are you in trouble? Is this hush money? You can tell me. That was the moment I decided she would never get another word from me again. Let her spin. Let her question and obsess. Let her lose sleep over it. I had my own plans, and none of them involved explaining myself to someone who wore white to another woman's son's wedding. By the end of that week, I knew something had shifted. People who had ignored me for years were suddenly acting like we were old friends. It started subtly. Likes on old photos. How have you been? From a cousin I hadn't heard from since the divorce. Then it escalated fast. One message read, "Heard about the wedding gift. Well, hope you're finally catching a break." Another, "Can't believe you've been sitting on that kind of money. What's your secret, girl?" And then came one I still remember word for word. "Be honest, did you marry a rich old man and just not tell anyone?" They didn't mean it as a joke. It wasn't curiosity. It was resentment dressed up in fake friendliness. Like they were all trying to smile through clenched teeth, hoping they could get just close enough to sniff out whatever advantage they thought I had. But the one who couldn't take it the most was her. My ex-husband's wife didn't stop calling. Morning, evening, random hours. She'd text if I didn't answer. She sent voice notes rambling about how we got off on the wrong foot and how money changes everything, followed by some bizarre story about her childhood and how she always dreamed of a big honeymoon, but never had the chance. She wasn't subtle. The begging was buried in layers of passive-aggressive flattery. At one point, she said, "You've always had this calm, powerful energy. I think it would be amazing if you could help us out now that you're in a position to." I didn't reply, not once. I didn't owe her anything. Let her stew. But I could feel her unraveling from the outside. It was like she couldn't handle not knowing. The not knowing was driving her insane. That envelope hadn't just been a wedding gift. It was a threat to everything she'd built her self-image around. She'd spent years painting me as pitiful, bitter, stuck in the past. Now suddenly, I was the one holding the cards, and she couldn't stand it. Then one afternoon, I looked up from my desk and saw him. My ex-husband, standing in the lobby of my office building, looking around like he wasn't sure he belonged there. He hadn't called, no warning. He knew where I worked, but he'd never come by before. I run a private consulting firm, high-end clients, all word of mouth, no sign on the door, no website, just a name on a lease and a locked front entrance. I built it slowly, carefully, after the divorce, while he and his new wife were busy buying designer furniture on credit and posting inspirational quotes about second chances. I stepped into the hallway and stood there, arms crossed. He looked nervous. He said he just wanted to check in, if I had 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I nodded. He didn't waste time. He said things had been hard at home, that she was sensitive, and the wedding had stirred up a lot of emotions. Then he looked me straight in the face and said it. I miss what we had. Not who I thought she was. Honestly, I think I made a mistake. He didn't even hesitate, just dropped it like he was asking for the time. This man had blown up our life, left me for a woman who mocked me openly at family events, who wore white to my son's wedding. And now, because I handed over one envelope, he wanted to walk back through a door he'd slammed shut a decade ago. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked back into my office, closed the door, sat down, and resumed my work like he hadn't said a word. He stood outside for maybe a minute before I heard the door click shut. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. The message was short this time. Hey, is ex-husband's name mad at me? He's acting weird, like distant. Just wondering if you've noticed anything. I stared at the screen for a second and smiled. She knew something had changed. She could feel it, but she didn't know what. And the worst part for her was that I wasn't going to tell her. Let her guess. Let her lose sleep, replaying every moment, every word, trying to figure out what she missed. Because now she was finally on the outside looking in. 2 weeks after the wedding, everything seemed to get quieter. On the surface, she'd slowed down with the messages. I hadn't heard from her in 3 days, which was a personal record. But that kind of silence from someone like her doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. Sure enough, the quiet didn't last. On a Thursday morning, I opened my front door to find a courier envelope on my porch. No postage, no return address, just my name written in blue ink. I brought it inside, made coffee, and opened it with a butter knife. Inside, a letter, typed, 2 pages, from a law firm I didn't recognize. It wasn't a lawsuit, not technically, but it might as well have been. The language was laughable. It said my excessively conspicuous financial contribution at the wedding had created a public spectacle that caused my ex-husband's wife considerable mental anguish and reputational harm. They said she was weighing options to protect her personal dignity. I read it 3 times, set it down, then actually laughed into my coffee. This woman, who'd called me the help in front of 100 people while dressed like a bride at my son's wedding, wanted to talk about reputational harm. I didn't reply. I didn't flinch. But I did forward it to my attorney just in case. He called back half an hour later, barely able to contain a chuckle. Tell her to send another letter. I'll frame them, he said. She can't touch you. The timing was strange because that same afternoon I got a call from my son. He asked if I was free for dinner, just the 2 of them and her parents. He sounded a little hesitant, like he expected me to say no. Of course I said yes. We met at a quiet restaurant near the lake. Classy, low lighting, cloth napkins. When I arrived, they were already seated. His wife hugged me the second I walked in. Her parents stood up, smiling, and shook my hand like I was someone important. It felt strange, like I was being honored and evaluated at the same time. We ordered wine, talked about the wedding, laughed about the cake disaster. The baker forgot the top tier. Then, after the main course, her father got serious. He pulled out a folder from under the table and slid it toward me. He said he'd done some research, quietly, through contacts. He knew I wasn't just comfortable, and that my work in consulting wasn't ordinary. Apparently, he'd reached out to one of my former clients, an executive who only speaks when it matters. And that conversation had changed everything. Inside the folder was a business proposal. He ran a private development firm. Boutique, discreet, extremely profitable. They were expanding, looking for someone with discretion, strategy, and connections. He wanted to bring me in as a silent partner. It wasn't just about work. It was a message. We see you. We respect you. We want you with us. I told him I'd consider it. He nodded and said, "There's no rush. We just wanted you to know we're not fooled by appearances. We know what value really looks like." We toasted, paid the bill, and as we stood outside the restaurant waiting for the valet, I caught a glimpse of something, or someone, across the street. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then I looked again. There she was, standing under a lamppost, half in shadow, watching us. She was wearing a beige coat, hair pulled back, no phone out, just standing, eyes locked on me. I didn't acknowledge her. I didn't need to. She'd followed me, whether by accident or design didn't matter. She had seen me walk out of a restaurant where her husband's ex-wife was being toasted like a queen. She'd seen the handshakes, the folder, the laughter, and that alone must have burned more than anything I could have ever said. I got into my car and drove away. Didn't check the mirror, didn't look back. But the next morning, I woke up to 3 voicemails from her and 1 from my ex. He didn't say much, just that he was really sorry about everything and that he didn't know how things had turned out the way they did. I did. I knew exactly how. While they were busy pretending, I had been building, quietly, patiently, on my own. And now they weren't just jealous. They were scared. A few days after the restaurant, things shifted again. This time, it came in the form of an invitation. A hand-delivered card, yes, a physical card, arrived at my house, cream-colored with gold lettering. Inside, written in that same familiar tone that tried too hard to sound warm, was an invitation to dinner from her, not him. Her. The message said she wanted to start over, that she thought it would be lovely if we could meet woman to woman to clear the air and find some common ground now that everything's in the open. There it was again, that phrase, everything's in the open, like she thought she finally knew what she was dealing with. I almost threw it away, but then I didn't. Instead, I replied with 1 line via text this time. I'll come, but you don't get to talk over me. The night of the dinner, I didn't dress up. I wore black slacks and a gray sweater, no makeup, no jewelry. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, someone who didn't need to prove anything. She answered the door herself. Her house looked the same as always, everything trying a little too hard, candles that had never been lit, fake books stacked on the coffee table, a painting of a city she'd never visited hanging above the fireplace. Dinner was already on the table. Chicken, some kind of pasta salad in a glass bowl that still had the price tag on the bottom. She poured wine and gave a little speech about fresh starts before we even sat down. Then, as soon as we did, she dropped the pretense. She wanted to know where I got the money, not just the check from the wedding. She wanted details, clients, businesses, names. I smiled and took a sip of wine. Then she said something that made everything click. You know, if you're doing something risky, something that could, collapse, maybe now's the time to be smart about sharing, before things get messy. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was a warning. I set my fork down, told her I knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't want to start over. She wanted leverage. She wanted information. And since she couldn't get it through manipulation, now she was trying intimidation. She didn't deny it. She looked me right in the eye and said, "You humiliated me. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone we know. You think people don't talk? You think they didn't notice the dress, the speech, the way they looked at you afterward? They're all talking about you now." I waited, let her finish. Then I stood up, picked up my glass, and said, "Yes, they're talking, and I've earned every word." She followed me to the door, still trying to talk. She said I was being selfish, that I was isolating myself from the new family, that she and my ex were struggling, and it wouldn't take much to break things. Then she added one last thing. "He's been thinking about you. He says your silence is louder than anything I've said in years." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I told her the truth. Not about my money, not about my business, just this. You think silence is weakness. It's not. It's distance. And that distance, and it's the only reason I still have peace. Then I left. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was scared, but because I knew what was coming. When someone like her realizes she can't win with charm, and she can't win with threats, she reaches for the last thing she has. Destruction. And she had no idea that everything she was about to try, I'd already survived worse. She didn't wait long. Less than a week after the dinner, it started. First came the rumors. Clumsy, obvious ones. A mutual acquaintance called to tell me someone had asked if I was under investigation. Another person said she'd heard I'd been quietly fired from some high-profile position I never even had. I didn't respond. I didn't correct anyone. I let it all sit. Then the calls began again, this time from numbers I didn't recognize. One voicemail said, "We're doing a background check. Just routine." I traced the number. It was a friend of hers, or maybe a favor she begged for. Either way, it was pathetic. It escalated fast. She started messaging my son's wife, asking questions, dropping hints, making it sound like she was concerned about my mental state. My daughter-in-law forwarded the messages to me without saying much, but I could tell she was angry. Very angry. The next morning, I received a screenshot from my son. It was a text from his stepmother. She'd written, "I don't want to start anything, but your mom might not be as stable as she seems. Just saying. People are asking questions. That was it. My son called her. I don't know what he said, but after that, she didn't call me again. The following week, I got an email from my ex. The subject line just said, "I'm sorry." He wrote 3 paragraphs about how everything had gotten out of hand. He said he didn't realize how damaged things were until he saw it up close. He said she'd been pushing people away for a long time and that he didn't see it clearly until now. He said he was tired. And then he said he wanted to talk. I never replied. I didn't need to. The truth is, I didn't feel angry anymore, or vindicated, or even smug. I just felt done. Finally, completely done with all of it. The whispers stopped, not because I explained myself, but because I didn't. People lost interest when they realized they couldn't figure me out. I stopped being the center of gossip when I refused to play the part they wrote for me. Weeks later, I took my son and his wife out to lunch. Just the 3 of us. They were glowing. New place, new routines, new life. Halfway through lunch, my daughter-in-law leaned across the table and said, "I hope I become like you. Not just because of what you gave us, but because of how you carry yourself." I didn't know what to say to that. I just smiled. Now, months later, they're thriving. She's disappeared from family events. I hear whispers that her marriage is falling apart, that she spends hours scrolling through social media, still trying to measure her life against mine. But I don't think about her much anymore. I've built something real, something she can't touch. Not with gossip, not with jealousy, not with lawsuits, threats, or guilt. And the best part? She never even figured out where the money came from. Not the wedding gift. Not the home I bought after the divorce. Not the silent partnerships I hold in businesses she'll never be invited into. All she ever saw was the version of me she wanted to believe in. The quiet ex-wife. The help. The woman she could talk over. She never once thought to ask what I was doing all those years while she was laughing in my face. No, she can keep wondering. The update. It had been quiet for months. Blissfully quiet. No calls. No drama. No reason to look over my shoulder. Then, last weekend, I got a message request on Instagram. The profile had no name, just a flower emoji and a private account. I almost ignored it, but the first line of the message stopped me. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I need to say this somewhere." It was her. A long, rambling message. No punctuation, no real apology, just fragments of thoughts, regrets, and questions. She said she didn't recognize herself anymore, that her marriage was unraveling, that she felt alone, used, embarrassed. She didn't ask for money, not this time. She just wanted to know how I did it, not the money, not the business. She meant the survival, the strength, the grace. How I stayed standing when she had spent so long trying to knock me down. I didn't answer. I left the message unread. I archived it, not out of cruelty, but because I'd already given her my answer. The moment I walked away from her dinner table without raising my voice, without defending myself, without letting her drag me back into her storm, I had answered her. I survived because I stopped trying to prove anything. I built because I stopped waiting for people to notice. And I won the moment I realized I didn't need to explain a thing to anyone who'd already decided who I was.